great artist and a tall and incredibly handsome hunk. They implant these super genes into a mother's womb, but by accident, they also implant all of the leftover genetic junk. Then 9 months later, out pops the ideal, according to our culture, baby, who grows up to be the ideal man, who is Arnold Schwarzenegger. But to everyone's surprise, a second baby also pops out, the embodiment of everything our culture says you don't want to be as a baby or a man, Danny DeVito. David, do you want to show us the first? There they are, and they're twins. And the whole movie goes on about how they're twins and all their adventures they have together. The implied message of the movie is that if you wanted to pick someone to be the CEO of your company, president of your country, or the pastor of your church, you'd pick Arnold Schwarzenegger every time because he was tall, handsome, intelligent, and powerful. But the last person you would ever pick would be Danny DeVito because he's short, weak, and unattractive. That's our culture. Our opinion of a person is often affected by how we perceive them based on their appearance. I have a small test for you. Anyone watch Spicks and Specks over the years? They have a beaut segment on it where you have to guess, is it a murderer or a musician? And I'm going to apply that test to you. First one, is it a murderer or a musician? Tell me.
Musician.
Musician? Who else thinks it's a musician? 2 people. Who thinks it's a murderer? Murderers have got it. He's an ex-murderer, apparently. All right, the next slide. Musician or a murderer? Murderer? Musician? Who thinks it's a murderer? Who thinks it's a musician?
Look at his hand.
Yes, he is a musician. It's Ian Curtis, whoever that is. Next one. Is he a murderer or a musician? No one can guess? An actor? Who thinks he's a murderer? Who thinks he's a musician? Musicians think, well, he's actually a murderer. He was in the army and he killed some of his fellow people in the army. All right, the last slide. Musician or a murderer? Who thinks this is a musician? Who thinks it's a murderer? Do you know who it is, do you, Bert? It is actually a musician. His name is Lemmy. When I was doing this, you can go finish it, that's it now, David. When I was doing it, I picked all these people and then I got my daughter to have a look and do it on her. Mum, she said, that's Bob Marley, everyone will know that. And I had people with, she reckons I picked all the long-haired people as murderers and the short-haired people as musicians. So anyway, so I redid it. So I've tricked some of you today, haven't I? But our society is obsessed, isn't it, with physical appearance. That's why many people spend time at health clubs, at the gym. Why one of the fastest growing industries in the Western world is plastic surgery. Can you believe it? I try and avoid pain at all costs, but people pay for it. And why people are continually on diets and being encouraged to buy all this special food. Billions of dollars are spent each year in the health and fitness industries. I mean, I'm all for being physically fit, but God has another standard. As we read this morning, when the prophet Samuel was looking for a man to be the second king of Israel, we find Samuel, the kingmaker, in deep mourning. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I've rejected him? He was the first king that they had. That points us back to, you'll find in chapter 15, if you read through Samuel, it ended in tears. The tears of Samuel, tears of God, and no unmentioned the tears of Saul. He had been the very first king of Israel. He was a magnificent specimen of a man, a head taller than all of his people, much loved by them. Pity was he loved himself too. That was his fatal flaw. He had a big head. He thought he knew what to do as the king even better than God did. Listen to what the storyteller says about King Saul right up front. He said in 9, "No one in Israel was more handsome than Saul. He stood head and shoulders above everyone else." He was ruggedly handsome and physically imposing. He was the kind of man that if you looked at him, you'd think, "Ooh, I could see this guy being king." And he was just what the people had asked for. Israel, people of Israel, wanted a king like all the other nations around them. They didn't want God to be their king. They wanted a physical king like everyone else. And the way the Bible describes Saul is pretty much how all the other nations described their kings. God said to Samuel, "Do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Man does not see what God sees, for man sees what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." Whereas man places a high price on the externals, God examines deep within that man for something more. Man judges one on the basis of one's appearance, but God critiques the heart. So God and Samuel gave the people what they asked for the first king, and it didn't go well. He was a disaster as a king. He was merciful when he should have been ruthless. He had trouble controlling his own soldiers. He didn't obey God, and he wouldn't listen to any of Samuel's advice. He micromanaged things he had no knowledge of and no business meddling with. Meanwhile, he let things go that he should have handled. His appearance was deceiving. Finally, Samuel had to tell Saul, "Now your rule won't last. The Lord will search for a man following the Lord's own heart, and the Lord will commission him as leader over God's people." You know, when I read that, the stuff that Saul did, I thought, it sounds familiar. Do you know any rulers that are a bit like that nowadays? Ever heard of Donald Trump? He's a bit like this, isn't he? Everyone looks at him and thinks, "Oh wow, he's a millionaire, he seems to know what he's doing. He talks big and then he backs down. He micromanages where he shouldn't be." I thought, wow, it's still going on today. The story as it goes on, as we read, is full of surprises. God is always doing things in ways we don't expect. So God commands Samuel to go to the smallest clan in the smallest tribe in a small town called Bethlehem. As God so often does, he will choose the least likely to accomplish his great work. He knows exactly what he's doing, even though we don't most of the time. So Samuel, as our story goes on, is told that one of Jesse's sons is to be the newly appointed king of Israel. And the sons are seen by Samuel one by one. Samuel looks at the young men, tall, strong, warrior types, but each one is rejected by God. Samuel would have been getting a bit confused, wouldn't he, after 7 sons are paraded in front of him. And he asked Jesse, "Is this it?" Imagine someone asking, "Is this it, your 7 sons? Well, have you got any more?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I've got one." And at this stage, it's interesting, we don't really know anything about David. We don't know his name or anything. So when Samuel is given the green light to anoint the young man, we discover then, we read that the Spirit of the Lord rushed on him. So the Holy Spirit came on him, and it says it was with him for the rest of his life. And Saul, it didn't seem to happen that way with Saul. the Holy Spirit seemed to come and go with Saul. I think as he stayed close to God, but then as he drifted away. Secondly, we also find out David's name. And you know, this is the first time the name of David appears in the Bible. And you know where the last time you hear about David? In the last book of the Bible, in Revelation 22, the last chapter. From here, right through our Bible, David will appear, his name will appear a little less than 1,000 times in Scripture. Isn't that amazing? I thought it was anyway. A bit of trivia, Gordon. But he was a man who was going to change the world, something that changed the world forever. The people have been crying for a king, and now they trusted God to provide the right king for them, his man. As we think about how this passage should change how we think about how we see people, let me remind you of what we've been told about David. This is how Saul was introduced in Samuel 9. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, son of Zeruiah, son of Bacharach, son of somebody, and a Benjamite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. So he came from a rich family. He had status already, didn't he, Saul, the first king? But in contrast to Saul, David is the youngest. He's the little brother. His father isn't included along with the elders of Bethlehem, so he's not a man of status. In other words, he's pretty much a nobody. And where is David when all of this business was going on about being chosen, being anointed by Samuel? This young, unimportant boy is out with the sheep. And you'd be asking, well, why would God pick someone like that? Why David? He seems an unlikely choice, doesn't he? Compared to Saul, who had everything going for him. It's like picking Arnold Schwarzenegger or Danny DeVito, isn't it? I've got a story for you about, in 1895, a German physics professor named Wilhelm Röntgen stumbled on a new kind of electromagnetic radiation. It's a mouthful, isn't it? As he experimented with these rays, he noticed that a fluorescent screen that had been painted with a chemical coating was lighting up with a faint glow, even though the radiation emitter was several feet away and wrapped in black cardboard. As he continued to explore this effect, he found these rays could also pass through books and papers on his desk. It wasn't long after this initial discovery that Röntgen discovered something else about this radiation. After his wife had assisted him in the lab by holding a photographic plate that was exposed to these rays, he noticed something remarkable. The developed photograph clearly revealed not simply her hand on the edge of the plate, but what was inside his wife's hand. The picture showed the bones under her skin. Since he didn't know what type of radiation this was, he simply labelled it X. So he became the first person to ever see inside the human body using X-rays. So that's where we got our X-rays from. It showed a completely different perspective on people, didn't it? And God did the same, looking past the outward appearances and right into David's heart. His heart was right. He was the skinny little shepherd herder who became king of Israel, the man whom Samuel sought and fought to succeed Saul. He ends up a mighty warrior, a valiant general, an inspired leader, a successful businessman, a skilled marksman, and a gifted psalm writer. But the thing that impressed God about David was his heart. God said, we read in Acts, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart, who will carry out my will. That was what was important to God. Not his looks, not his money, not anything, only his heart, because David loved God. And David allowed God to mould him, because when he was anointed, as king by Samuel, he was just a young boy. He still had a lot of growing to do, but he allowed God to work in his life and to mould him. God focused on his character more than his physical stature. He concentrated on his integrity and not just outward looks. You know those people who, I don't know how many of you go on social media. I know all our young people do. Mystique? No, you don't go on it. Good girl. They're all, I know our teenagers in our house, they can't even go to the toilet without the phone with them. You know, it sucks their life. They look on it and see all the stuff. The same on our, what do they call them, influencers and all this stuff on TV. You know, you always see people posting the gorgeous pictures of themselves and their lives on social media. They always look just like they've stepped off a movie set. Their spouse has perfect teeth and hair. Their kids are always doing something adorable, and they just happen to be filming them at the time. They're always doing something spectacular, like wonderful holidays, skiing, going here and there. Plus, if you just went by their Instagram, you'd think that every meal they cooked was gourmet and their cakes never burned or fell. Not like poor Dina trying to teach me how to make a sponge. Do these people sound familiar to you? But then if you scratch the surface and go a bit deeper, you find out he's pretty dumb. She's unhappy in the marriage. They're one paycheck away from personal bankruptcy, and at least one of their kids is a budding psychopath. See what happens when you judge according to appearances? You can end up thinking that everyone else is happier and better off than you are, just because that's the appearance they project. Thank goodness that God does look at our hearts and is not deceived by this outward carrying on. But then I think, you know what? I think we've all become very good at hiding our true selves, thinking that maybe God wouldn't accept us, or maybe other people wouldn't. I've got a story about a telemarketer, your favourite people. He called a home one day and a small voice whispered, "Hello?" And he said, "Hello, what's your name?" Still whispering, the voice said, "Jimmy." "How old are you, Jimmy?" "I'm 4. "Good. Is your mother home?" "Yes, but she's busy." "Okay, is your father home?" "He's busy too." "I see. Who else is there?" "The police." "The police? May I speak to one of them?" "They're busy." "Any other grown-ups there?" "The firemen." "May I speak with a fireman, please?" "They're all busy." "Jimmy, all those people in your house and I can't talk to any of them? What are they doing?" "Looking for me," whispered Jimmy. So maybe we're a bit like that. Sometimes we hide ourselves. Do you reckon? We hide who we truly are. Is that true? I can see a few people nodding. Why do we hide from each other and from God? We think sometimes that we're too awkward, too brash, too timid, too unconventional, or we think we're unqualified, incompetent, or inadequate in some other way. We might say the wrong thing, or we won't know what to say at all. Maybe we think we're too boring, too weird, too insensitive. Can't see any hands going up. Don't put your hand up. Or perhaps we'll all get too emotional and share too much, or get so confused we won't be able to say anything coherent. Do you feel like that sometimes? We feel we're not attractive enough, not wearing the right clothing, we've got the wrong hairdo, or picked the wrong shoes. Everyone will notice our list of flaws and reject us for them. We dread the thought, don't we, of people really knowing who we are, how nervous we are. Because look around, everyone else is so cool and calm and collected. And we're afraid we'll reveal our nervousness. We might have sweaty palms, shaking hands or squeaky voices. And once they realise how nervous we are, we'll be shown up as the imposter that we really are. Is that how sometimes you might feel? You feel you're not good enough? That people mightn't accept you if they know who you really are inside? But you know what? They're the sort of people that God really wants. He chose, you look through the Bible and through history, they're the people that he chooses, the most unlikely people, like David was. But think back, an old man Moses, he was a murderer, and he was too scared to speak up unless he had his brother standing next to him. That's Moses. What about Gideon? Hiding away when there was armies around him, hiding away, crushing up a bit of corn to make some wheat, flour to make some dinner. And as an angel comes and says, Gideon, oh mighty warrior. Who, me? Mighty warrior? You see, God sees past who we are at the moment. He sees what you can be. What about in the New Testament, Matthew? You know, he was a robber and a traitor to his people. People spat on him as he walked along the street. But God picked him. God said, Matthew, you're the one, follow me. What about Peter, the hot-headed fisherman who let Jesus down when it mattered most? What about Mary Magdalene, a woman of the red light district who was demon-possessed? And David, the skinny shepherd boy, who wasn't even considered important enough by his own family to be counted in the sons until the father was reminded. So what does Jesus see when he looks at the real you? He might see people with low self-esteem, doubters, self-haters, inadequate, the bad things that you've done. He knows and sees it all, but you know what? He loves you anyway, and he wants you. As we'll see in the next few weeks, David, even though he was a man described by God as someone after his own heart, he made big mistakes. He was far from perfect, and we'll find out about this as we go. You know what? He ended up killing so many people in his lifetime that God wouldn't even let him build the temple. This was the man after God's own heart, and he said, no, David, there's too much blood on your hands. We'll leave that job for your son. But God chose David knowing it all, and he chooses you and me knowing it all. Don't be like some people we read about in the Bible who said no to Jesus. What about the rich young ruler who came to Jesus? What can I do to be saved? And he said, oh, I've done all those things. Jesus said, follow me. But he couldn't do it. He chose his wealth over Jesus. Or Nicodemus, who knew in his heart that Jesus was the Messiah, but he couldn't give up his the respect and the position in the eyes of the people that he had. It was his pride that kept him. We're going to look at doing The Chosen in July, the movie, the seasons, and there's a really sad picture in there. And I know this is not written out in the Bible, but this is how the person has thought, that Nicodemus, he hid behind the wall when he saw Jesus leaving with his tribe of disciples. And you can see the longing, and I think it would be so accurate. He's longing to follow Jesus, knowing it, but he just couldn't give up what he already had. Couldn't give up the life that he had, the status that he had. He couldn't do it. And you probably feel unworthy when you stand before Jesus too. And you know what? You're right. You are unworthy. And that's why Jesus had to come and choose us and save us and die on the cross for us. He sees past our life before to a new life that he has planned for us. So say yes to Jesus today. Don't be like the ones who said no, because he's choosing you.